we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And the LGBTQI news does not stop in the summertime.
It used to. It really, all news used to stop in the summertime, but not anymore.
And we start with some good news. A federal judge has overturned Mississippi's harsh anti-LGBT religious freedom law.
Because it was a mess. We'll give you details. And another good piece of news, the U.S. military has officially opened service to transgender service members.
And another piece of good news. We rarely start out this way. We'll get to the bad news.
Yeah.
The United Nations Human Rights Council has voted to have an LGBT rights watchdog, but this did not come about without some controversy.
The Justice Department has challenged North Carolina's anti-transgender law, asking for a preliminary injunction against it, but Donald Trump has reiterated his support for the law.
The National Park Service police arrested a gay man at a gay beach in New York.
After his towel slipped off.
That's his story. That's not their story.
There are some conflicting stories here.
Just off the phone with the park police.
We will last week we led with how wonderful the Park Service was,
Yes.
And now this week we're at they're arresting a gay man.
For public nudity.
Do we need to open with any comments about the Hillary Clinton email decision?
You gonna drag me down that road?
I'm not going to drag you anywhere. It just seems
all
like
I will
there's
say
a lot of news that we're not talking about.
All I will say is my priority as a gay person is to see my rights preserved in the next election, and I don't think the report on her helps that effort.
And I don't think the presumptive Republican nominee has made the same commitment to our rights.
On the other hand, there were other reports that came out this week, like the Chilcot report on the Iraq War, indicting Tony Blair, which has led to the deaths of 1 million people in the Middle East.
And as we are taping today, we see the incident
Yes.
in Baton Rouge, where the police appeared to murder a suspect who they had controlled on the ground. All of which...
And at least the federal government is investigating that.
I should hope so. But that's just what's currently on our mind as we tape. So
Yes.
Let's get to the news that you're waiting for. And the big one is Mississippi. Now, some months ago, Mississippi passed a religious freedom law, which we described at the time, and everybody described as the broadest religious exemption to discriminate law passed anywhere, anytime. And
This is Governor Phil Bryant, he with the gay son, gay son.
And it was an interesting law because what it said specifically was, if you hold the following beliefs, that marriage should only be legal between a man and a woman, that people should not have premarital sex, and was there one other belief that was enshrined?
Well, this is why Judge Carlton Reeves, and we have
Yes.
a picture of him down there, struck it down, because he said the state has put its thumb on the scale to favor some religious beliefs over others. Showing such favor tells not adherents that they are outsiders, not full members of the political community, and adherents that they are insiders, favored members of the political community. So it was an excellent analysis. He cited the Equal Protection Clause and, made a sweeping rejection of this law.
He did, because it was so specifically discriminatory. This wasn't a law that said, in general, if you have religious objections to something and you're performing your religious duties, you're allowed to discriminate. It said specifically, these people for these reasons may discriminate against these people.
Yeah,
and that was completely unconstitutional.
Keep specific religious views out of the public sphere. That's what we have to do. Look, I've cited it before, but right here in New York, they want to make special hours for Orthodox Jewish women to swim alone at a public pool. That, to me, you can't go down that road, because as soon as you start accommodating specific religious beliefs with public institutions, it's the end of the separation of church, synagogue, mosque, and state.
Well, here are a few little pieces of the decision quoted. The judge said that the law was not rationally related to any legitimate end. The state-sanctioned discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity under the guise of protection for religious exercise is unconstitutional.
Well, he said this authorized arbitrary discrimination against LGBT and unmarried persons.
In essence, giving special rights to bigots, and that this is deprivation of equal protection, that deprivation of equal protection is the law's very essence.
Now, the last I read about this, the Mississippi Attorney General Jim Hood said he doesn't know if his office will appeal the ruling. What's the latest, Ann? You usually know.
He's put me on the spot. I read the same thing you did.
Okay.
That the governor wants to appeal the ruling,
Can he?
but the attorney...
Attorney
Sure,
General's
why not?
Attorney General's a Democrat, isn't he?
Yes, he is, and
so,
all the governor has to do is hire a special counsel or whatever to appeal it. But the Attorney General said not only that he didn't think it was worth appealing, he said the public was duped by this law, and that it was too expensive to waste the state's money on appealing it.
And they don't have very much money there in Mississippi.
No, they do not.
I mean, I think it's in North Carolina. They just appropriated another $500,000 that they're taking out of funds for disaster relief to defend their horrible anti-gay law.
I would call that causing a disaster. But remember when the U.S. House of Representatives kept appropriating money to defend the Defense of Marriage Act in court? We saw how far they got with that.
Yes.
And all the states which have been forced to pay legal fees for all the marriage cases they lost. This is financial ruin for people.
Well, certainly for Mississippi.
Well, so in North Carolina, the Senate did approve $500,000 more to defend HB 2. Meanwhile,
Well, it has to pass the House.
okay, well, but they're at a session now.
Well.
They ended their session, and they ended it by passing a small tweak to the law, but it didn't change anything for transgender people in bathrooms.
And it didn't satisfy the National Basketball Association.
What the tweak did was reinstate citizens of the state's ability to sue the state for discrimination. But since sexual orientation and gender identity are not in the state's human rights law, it doesn't help any of us sue the state for discrimination, and it just fixes something that people got up in arms about. The National Basketball Association, I'm happy to say, is not duped by this. They rejected this as a fix out of hand and said, hey, you can't fool us. We know what you're doing, and it's not good enough.
Well, we buried the headline in North Carolina, which is that the Justice Department has asked a federal judge to halt the implementation and enforcement of the law.
Yes, they've asked for a preliminary injunction against enforcement of the law.
Neither Obama nor Clinton addressed this when they were down in North Carolina, but Donald Trump did. He gave, well...
he was asked by a reporter.
Yeah, about HB 2, which is this law, and he said, I'm going with the state.
I've talked to the governor. I've talked to a lot of people. I'm with the state on this. Now, meanwhile, about 10
but
minutes
I'm going to
earlier,
be better. I'm going to be better
yes,
for the gay community.
Yes. He's telling an audience.
I'm going to be better. How exactly are you going to be better? Please, I mean, do we have to review this every week? Maybe in this week with Hillary having all this trouble, it's good to remind you he has promised to appoint Supreme Court justices who will overturn same-sex marriage.
Which is exactly why his Republican supporters support him.
And possibly reinstate the sodomy laws, because some of them are in favor of that. Some of the judges he has said he would name are in favor of that. He will repeal all Obama executive orders on gay rights and everything else. He will leave all this discrimination stuff up to the states. It's a states' rights issue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He has yet to meet with AIDS activists, as the Democratic candidates did. I mean, look, this is a nonpartisan show. We're just reporting the facts here.
Yes, well, it soon may not be just up to the states, because next week the Republican-controlled House of Representatives is going to hold a hearing on the First Amendment Defense Act.
Yeah, they're going to do this on July the 12th, I think.
Yes, they are, 1 month to the day after the Orlando massacre. H.R. 2802.
Let's take more rights away from LGBT people.
Because that is our mission in life, and it is...
It's a winner.
This law is another religious freedom exemption to discriminate act that would be a national law that the Republicans are very hot to...
Which has no chance of getting through the Senate, where you need 60 votes to get things passed.
Well, but who knows what will happen next year, depending on who's elected to each of the houses and the presidency.
So we want you to circle a date on your calendar in November to vote. When is the election? It's the first Tuesday in November if it's not the first of the month.
I want to say it's the 8th, but
I'm going to look it up.
You look it up while I
talking.
continue to talk. Representative Cicilline from Rhode Island, who is one of our out gay members of Congress, said that the hearing on the First Amendment Defense Act, aren't I filling nicely? You should be pulling it out. Can't you look it up on your machine?
No, I don't have it.
Cicilline says this is an election year stunt to rally conservatives.
I don't think I brought my book. I thought I did.
Well, you have a little handheld computer there. You can look it up.
No, it's too slow. It's too slow.
All right. Well, I'll look it up on mine.
And we'll look it up while I do the next one. Meanwhile, New Hampshire Governor Maggie Hassan has issued an executive order prohibiting discrimination on the basis of gender identity and expression for state employees and contractors. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, that's a good thing. And in Michigan, the little town of Howell, which was the scene of cross burnings in the 80s, has passed a non-discrimination law, including sexual orientation and gender identity, for housing and employment.
Speaking of the elections,
I was right. Bill has come to our rescue. November 8th is the election.
November the 8th. Mark it on your calendars.
Yeah.
You should vote in every election. That's a nonpartisan thing to say. Vote in primaries if you can. Vote in general elections. Don't just vote for president. Vote for local offices every time they come up. Vote in referenda if you can get through all those things.
Look how much the Brits are regretting not voting in that election.
In the Brexit
or voting
election.
the wrong way.
Yes, and everybody who put it into effect has left office. And they're leaving. They're leaving you to clean up the mess.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we should talk about what's going on in the military.
Certainly.
Should we not? Well, I mean, this is the big news this week. We have a picture of Defense Secretary Ashton Carter, Ash Carter. There he is in the tie.
The red tie.
Yes, in the middle with a bunch of transgender troops.
Yep.
Because they have lifted the ban on transgender military service. Maybe we should watch the tape first.
Well, a couple of details. They're going to take a year to fully implement this and let new recruits apply, and those will have to have been stable in their gender identity for 18 months. And those who are already in the service can start getting medical care and change their gender identity on their papers October 1st.
It says that transgender troops will receive any medically necessary care, including surgery.
So
he said.
He gave a speech. This is 6.5 minutes long. It's all fascinating. And so we want to look at our Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, announcing the change in policy by the Defense Department.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm here today to announce some changes in the Defense Department's policies regarding transgender service members. And before I announce what changes we're making, I want to explain why. There are three main reasons, having to do with our future force, our current force, and matters of principle. The first and fundamental reason is that the Defense Department and the military need to avail ourselves of all talent possible in order to remain what we are now, the finest fighting force the world has ever known. Our mission is to defend this country, and we don't want barriers unrelated to a person's qualification to serve preventing us from recruiting or retaining the soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine who can best accomplish the mission. We have to have access to 100% of America's population for our all-volunteer force to be able to recruit from among them the most highly qualified and to retain them. Now, while there isn't definitive data on the number of transgender service members, RAND looked at the existing studies out there, and their best estimate was that about 2,500 people out of approximately 1.3 million active duty service members, and about 1,500 out of approximately 825,000 reserve service members are transgender, with the upper end of their range of estimates of around 7,000 in the active component and 4,000 in the reserves. Although relatively few in number, we're talking about talented and trained Americans who are serving their country with honor and distinction. We invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to train and develop each individual, and we want to take the opportunity to retain people whose talent we've invested in and who've proven themselves. And this brings me to the second reason, which is that the reality is that we have transgender service members serving in uniform today. And I have a responsibility to them and to their commanders to provide them both with clearer and more consistent guidance than is provided by current policies. We owe commanders better guidance on how to handle questions such as deployment, medical treatment, and other matters. And this is particularly true for small unit leaders, like our senior enlisteds and junior officers. Also, right now, most of our transgender service members must go outside the military medical system in order to obtain medical care that is judged by doctors to be necessary. And they have to pay for it out of their own pockets. This is inconsistent with our promise to all our troops that we will take care of them and pay for necessary medical treatment. I and the Defense Department's other senior leaders who have been studying this issue over the past year have met with some of these transgender service members. They've deployed all over the world, serving on aircraft, submarines, forward operating bases, and right here in the Pentagon. And while I learned that in most cases their peers and local commanders have recognized the value of retaining such high-quality people, I also learned that the lack of clear guidelines for how to handle this issue puts the commanders and the service members in a difficult and unfair position. One service member I met with described how some people had urged him to leave the military because of the challenges he was facing with our policies, and he said he just wouldn't quit. He was too committed to the mission, and this is where he wanted to be. These are the kind of people we want serving in our military. The third and final reason for the change, also important, is a matter of principle. Americans who want to serve and can meet our standards should be afforded the opportunity to compete to do so. After all, our all-volunteer force is built upon having the most qualified Americans. And the profession of arms is based on honor and trust. Army Chief of Staff General Milley recently reminded us of this when he said, and I quote him, "The United States Army is open to all Americans who meet the standard, regardless of who they are." Embedded within our Constitution is that very principle, that all Americans are free and equal. And we as an Army are sworn to protect and defend that. Defending the country has to come first. I directed the working group to start with the presumption that transgender persons can serve openly without adverse impact on military effectiveness and readiness unless and except where objective practical impediments are identified. I think it's fair to say this has been an educational process for a lot of people here in the department, including me. We had to look carefully and deliberately at medical, legal, and policy considerations that have been evolving very rapidly in recent years. And we had to take into account the unique nature of military readiness and make sure we got it right. I'm proud of the thoughtful and deliberate manner in which the department's leadership has pursued this review. I've been guided throughout by one central question. Is someone the best qualified service member to accomplish our mission?
Well, a big step forward.
And the immediate effect of this is no more discharges of trans military members. And we should remind ourselves that trans people are serving in the military of 18 other countries already. We are not groundbreaking in this.
But the most famous transgender soldier is in prison, Chelsea Manning. And Chelsea says this business of having a stable identified gender for 18 months as certified by the doctor before they can enter, he says, how many young trans people like myself fit that criteria? And then she says the idea of having a gender certification process is a misuse of medically accepted standards of care, and worries about further entrenching the binary, and says, and not to be too selfish here, but how about those of us in prison? What's going to happen to us?
Yeah.
So those issues have been raised.
Well, she's been abused in prison as a trans person.
Yes.
At Fort Leavenworth. So there's still a lot to be ironed out.
Yeah.
All right.
And staying on some trans, so congratulations, because a couple of weeks ago we didn't even know if this was going to happen.
There was concern.
But there's a kind of a setback in the Virginia case of Gavin Grimm, who was a student at a high school, who was trying to use the boys' bathroom, which is consistent with his gender identity. The school board has asked a judge to hold off on letting him use the boys' room
Well, it's just
while they
another-
appeal the case to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, that hasn't been granted. It's just the school board
I mean-
desperately still trying to do it.
Why can't you be more like the Attorney General of Alabama and just give in?
The Williams Institute at the UCLA School of Law, our think tank and research operation, has issued an updated analysis of national surveys and now says that about 1.4 million Americans, and I think that's adult Americans, are transgender, 0.6% of the U.S. population. That is double the previous estimate and is based on updated national surveys.
I forgot a political note from Massachusetts. There's a state senator up there named Jamie Eldridge, a Democrat, who's being challenged by a Republican, Ted Busiek of Littleton, who tweeted out about Donald Trump putting self-righteous faggots in their place since 1993. How I love this fellow. So then this guy says, well, I didn't intend to use it in the hateful sense. He said, or imply that the congressman was gay. Using the word, he said, he meant to mean the congressman was obnoxious and a jerk.
How many centuries have we heard that explanation?
All right.
I'm sick of it. All right. Good news from Indiana, where a court there has told the state health commissioner that he must list both lesbian parents of a child on a birth certificate, that no longer can the state refuse to put the second parent on the birth certificate, but that lesbian couples must be treated like heterosexual couples. And just because your child is born as a result of alternative insemination or adoption or whatever, the two parents get listed as the two parents on the birth certificate.
There is no conceivable government interest in doing it any other way, the judge said.
Okay.
And cited the 14th Amendment. Nice to be protected by the 14th Amendment.
And in California, a court there says that ChristianMingle.com
Oh, yes.
must serve same-sex couples or people seeking a same-sex partner. Would you trust Christian Mingle would you go on Christian Mingle to seek a partner?
If I were washed in the blood of the Lamb, perhaps I would. I don't mean to make light of it, but for some people that's a very important thing when they enter into a relationship.
And I'm not trying to cast aspersions on dating sites or any of that. I'm saying that a site that has been so homophobic might not be the first place that I would look.
But did you read about Ashley Madison?
Not lately.
Okay, here's the latest development. Ashley Madison, their stuff got out.
The adultery site.
This is where you went to have an affair.
Yes.
they were using tons of bots, phony females on there that you would keep writing letters to and everything.
Yeah.
They didn't exist.
Yeah.
This was just to get your money and keep you
Yeah.
going on the thing. So you're trying to have an affair, and you can't even, meet real people. All
What
right.
a shame. But the judge in Arkansas was meeting real people. You remember this guy who was asking defendants to come to his house and pose for sexually provocative pictures
Yes.
of men, and then giving them lighter sentences? Well, they've now gone into his computer and found thousands of pictures of nude men, including these guys he brought over to the house, the defendants, and he has resigned from his position.
How did he get away with this for so long? Were people so ashamed to come forward and say, you've got a sex screwball over there, you got to do something about it?
They were defendants who had been charged with crimes, and he held the power over them.
Well, there's like that judge that put all those kids away because he had a contractual agreement with the prison, to lock all these kids up.
Exactly.
Terrible, terrible,
The system
terrible
is
stuff.
rigged.
Now,
It is rigged.
stay in Arkansas for a second.
Okay.
Because last week we told you that Texarkana, Arkansas got rid of their LGBT rights law.
Yes.
I had not known that the voters were the ones who repealed it by 3,409 to 881, 80 to 20%, which is the largest margin of defeat for any pro-LGBT measure. It says in history, not quite. I think they did 81% for against same-sex
Well, I'd
marriage
like to know
in
more about
Mississippi.
that.
But anyway.
Oh, we know that there was an outside influence, that there were right-wing groups from outside who came in and ran,
this was a
your
vote.
predictable campaign.
All right.
Like the campaign that got Houston to kill its...
60-40. Sadly,
well,
people
fine.
fall for this.
This is Texarkana, Arkansas.
Well, the council had unanimously passed the bill.
I understand that.
It's sad.
People are voting for Trump, too.
The Democratic Party platform on LGBT rights has come out. We get one paragraph. It says there's still much more work to be done. It's kind of scant on specifics.
They must have been watching this show.
They don't even name the LGBT rights law, the Equality Act. But
That is disappointing.
Yeah.
They should be mentioning the Equality Act and supporting it.
well, they say they'll fight for comprehensive federal non-discrimination protections for all LGBT Americans.
Okay.
But I mean, they need to get behind a bunch of specifics that we still need.
Yes.
And the Republicans need to do it too, and the independents.
Well, in Florida, the Department of Children and Families has done an about-face. They have reinstated the non-discrimination rules, including sexual orientation and gender identity, for youth in the child welfare system, foster kids, kids in group homes. And they have also mandated training for workers in these settings and appointed an ombudsman to work on their behalf.
Did we do this Iowa lawsuit by the church?
We're about to.
Okay. In Des Moines, a church has filed a federal lawsuit seeking to strike down an unconstitutional portion of the 2007 law in the city law that applies to transgender people using restrooms.
Well, here's what happened. The Iowa Civil Rights Commission has non-discrimination, the state has non-discrimination laws. So the Iowa Civil Rights Commission was asked, how does this apply to religious organizations? Because there is a standard religious exemption in the law. And the Iowa Civil Rights Commission put out a pamphlet that said, unfortunately, that churches have a bona fide exemption from this law if in the performance of their religious duties, such as running I'm sorry, but they cannot invoke that exemption for things that are not direct religious
if you're running child care or something like that, and all those kinds of things.
Or if you are doing a church service open to the public. And people lost their minds and said, what do you mean a church service open to the public is not a religious function and should not, and requires you to follow human rights laws, and you can't say what you want in a church service. And frankly, the people are right. So what should happen is that the Iowa Human Rights Commission, Civil Rights Commission,
Should more narrowly draw it.
they should, can that pamphlet and agree that a church service is protected. But instead, they have opened themselves to this possibility of the right wing filing this lawsuit,
Right.
which is now going to challenge the whole human rights law.
Well, here's what the church says. It says that maleness or femaleness is designed by God and is tied to biology, chromosomes, physiology, and anatomy, if you didn't know.
Well, the church is allowed to say that because they're a church. We may not like it, but they are a church and they have protection.
Well,
but the state,
Yes.
the Civil Rights Commission made the mistake of saying they're not allowed to say
Yes.
that, and the right wing is saying
Yes.
you are
But
censoring a church.
if they're providing social services what if they're providing social services under government contracts?
That's not the question here.
Well, okay.
That's a separate question to be discussed or adjudicated. The Civil Rights Commission went too far in a pamphlet, not in any prosecutions,
Yes.
just in a pamphlet.
I think
that opened the door for the right wing to cry foul and say you're censoring us.
I think I understand it now, which is why I watch Gay USA. And we wondered if we were ever gonna see a same-sex wedding in Dawson County, Texas. Well, 1 year after it was made legal, two women came into the clerk's office and they got a license for the first time, same-sex couple. County Clerk Gloria Vera said it was like any other one. We just did it. They're very plain-spoken there.
On the other hand, you remember Kim Davis in Kentucky. I thought you were going to say we were wondering whether we would ever see the end of Kim Davis. Well, the answer is no, because she with her attorneys from Liberty Counsel are fighting a records request by the state attorney general. So it continues to be a mess there.
Well, so there's a lot of mess in Texas and in Mississippi and North Carolina. So New York State has decided to appeal for their business. They've started something called the Open Doors campaign, unveiled by Governor Cuomo, who likes to show his pro-LGBT credentials out there. We could talk about some problems we have in this state, but
and we will.
Let's show you the ad that they are running in these states, trying to, what's the word?
Grab business.
Yes. We have the tape somewhere.
We do, but we called for it out of order, so it may be
I'm sorry about
just
that.
a little slow in coming up. But I'm
we'll
sure
see
it'll
if we
be
can
here
find
any
it.
second.
Any second,
Advertising campaign by New York State running in North Carolina.
Why are so many different people proud to say I love New York? Because New York State is proud to love them right back. New York loves diversity, loves equality, loves fighting to protect the rights for all. We make it our business because it's good for business. Today, when love is under attack by hate, we welcome those with big hearts and big visions for what the world can become. It's why so many Fortune 500 companies are proud to call New York State home. Learn more at business.ny.gov.
Of course, I will warn you, if you intend on moving here, they've done everything they can by giving into the real estate industry and making the city totally unaffordable.
But that's becoming true so many places.
Well,
more to the point, we have congressional races in New York, and Gays Against Guns, the new group that has sprung up after the Orlando massacre and is becoming quite active around here, and you may want to start your own chapters around the country. Gays Against Guns did a couple of actions this weekend, specifically targeting a Republican congressman in Long Island who's running for re-election and who has been the recipient of money from the National Rifle Association, who have also endorsed Donald Trump. So Gays Against Guns did a couple of things. First, they went out to Fire Island this weekend and they recreated the action they'd done in the Pride Parade, where they had 49 people dressed in white with white veils and carrying the names of the 49 people killed in Orlando. And they went up and down the beach in Fire Island and handed out flyers explaining who they were and what they were doing and collecting a few donations, but spreading the word educationally about the group and about their efforts. What they have decided to do is do a shaming campaign against members of Congress who have taken NRA money in an attempt to advance the effort to change the laws around guns, and the understanding that you have to change Congress to do this, and you have to target people.
There was some talk of having some minimal thing voted on this week in the House, yes?
Yeah, yes.
Also talk of punishing House members who acted up and sat in on the floor.
Yes, and talk of a new LGBT political action committee fund raising money to try to get rid of some of these members of Congress.
Well,
so Gays Against Guns on Monday, on the 4th of July, went to the 4th of July parade in Patchogue, Long Island, where Lee Zeldin, this congressman who is running for re-election,
He didn't show up.
He did not show up at the 4th of July.
He must have heard they were coming.
Exactly. And so they joined the parade. They carried a puppet
They let
of
gays
him.
in the parade?
They handed out flyers. They went to his district office and did a die-in. They really made themselves visible and shamed him into invisibility. And I thought it was a great idea, and I hope that other people will take up this idea around the country.
Well, actually, the oldest 4th of July parade in the country goes back to the, right after 1776 in Bristol, Rhode Island. And they were inspired, gays there were, this is a little town.
Yeah.
My parents lived there before they passed away. But they were inspired by the St. Patrick's Day parade stuff that we all did here, and they got a contingent there, 20-something years ago to march in that parade. And there was some resistance, but it happened, and away they went. And gun control is becoming a big issue embraced by the community because of Orlando, in a big, big way. 6 gun control bills were passed in California. Governor Jerry Brown signing them. He didn't like some of them, but he signed 6 of them. And it was touted by Equality California, which had worked very hard to help them pass.
So Queer Nation and allied forces are getting in on this, and we've been meeting, and we wanted to do something to make a splash around the Republican convention. And we're not going to Cleveland, and we certainly expect there will be a lot of action by protesters in Cleveland. Who knows what will happen there? That's the week after next. It's starting Monday the 18th is the Republican convention in Cleveland.
So here in New York, there is going to be an action on Monday, July 18th, to coincide with the opening of the convention at 5 o'clock at Trump Tower, which is 5th Avenue and 56th Street.
Correct.
The title of it is simple: Stop the Hate, Stop the Guns.
And by that, we want to incorporate both anti-LGBT discrimination and bigotry and all the laws they're trying to pass, and try to lobby and argue for pro-LGBT laws, and object to the rampant gun violence in this country, and combine the thoughts. But what we need to bring these issues to the fore and make a big impact on the Republican convention and the Democratic convention the week after is a massive, massive demonstration at Trump Tower. So we really urge you to consider showing up for that.
We'll be there.
We will certainly be there, and we are in the process of contacting everybody we can think of, groups and individuals, but you could help out with that. And
tell all your friends, bring your friends. It's a Monday. Theaters are closed.
If you go to queernationni.org, you can subscribe to the Queer Nation news feed or get announcements about this. There will be a separate Facebook page up in the next day or two, probably by the time you see this, for the Stop the Hate, Stop the
Or do something
guns.
in your own locality.
Please.
To draw attention to these issues.
Please.
Do something vis-a-vis your member of Congress if they are resisting
if they
gun
are
control.
funded by the NRA.
And I do know some of you out there are pro-gun. And have a lot of weapons and have told us that you need them for protection.
Absolutely.
But we're trying to make things safe.
Exactly.
And I'm sure you want to make them safe as well for your sake. And look, we lost this week Abner Mikva, a big federal judge, but also a former congressman, great liberal lion. There was tremendous resistance by the NRA to having him confirmed as a judge many years ago, 30 years ago, because he wanted handguns banned. handguns, not assault weapons, handguns, which was killing people in Chicago and still are.
Yep. So there are many ways for you to get involved, and people do write to us and ask how to get involved, and the answer is just do it.
And we also mourn the loss of Elie Wiesel this week. I mean, who was,
Certainly understood hate and violence.
I remember reading Night in high school, and it was quite affecting.
Now, on a more minor note, but still disturbing, we were made aware this week of an incident at a beach in New York that's considered a gay beach, that is habituated.
Greece Park,
Yes.
It's a public park, but it's also on federal land, so it's run by the National Park Police. So.
On the 4th of July.
There were a lot of cops out there looking for drugs and any other kind of disturbances, and they ended up arresting this guy for public nudity and carrying him out. Now, that's what you're seeing there. The police story is we were arresting some other people for public urination. They said, "Why aren't you arresting that guy? He's standing there naked taking pictures." He's a photographer. He's a photographer. And they went over to him. Their story is they asked him to cover up. He wouldn't. They would have just written him a ticket, but he sat down. He resisted arrest, resisted anything, resisted covering up, said he had a right to do this. That's their story. So,
his story is that he was out there photographing. He'd been there many times. He was married on that beach. And he was photographing. His towel dropped accidentally. He was naked under the towel, and suddenly a dozen Park Service cops appear out of nowhere and throw him to the ground and carry him off.
It will take more witnesses, and there were many, to sort all this out and figure out what happened. The Park Service seemed eager to say we didn't overstep our bounds. He was very, resistant. They also want to emphasize to you the only national park where you can go nude is at Sandy Hook. They've got one
in New Jersey.
A nude beach in New Jersey.
Sandy Hook in New Jersey,
yes.
Not the massacre site in Connecticut.
No, I have a correction from last week. We talked about the Washington State case about the law requiring pharmacists to fill prescriptions. The court in that case declined to hear the case, so the lower court decision upholding the law stood. The court didn't rule in that case. Thank you to a viewer for pointing that out.
All right, should we move to international news?
Yes, we should.
Let's do that. Well, the United Nations Human Rights Council decided after much debate with great objections by Islamic countries, among others, to appoint an LGBT rights watchdog to monitor violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity around the world.
This was put forth by the Latin American countries who have really come around on they're really the leaders on LGBT issues now at the UN.
Footnote later. The Islamic countries did succeed in getting some amendments added to this that require the monitor to take into consideration local cultural
religious sensitivities, and also don't use coercive measures like taking away our money. And it was very sad to see South Africa abstain on this. South Africa has in its own constitution a ban on sexual orientation discrimination.
Yes.
They've got same-sex marriage. They were one of the leaders in this, but they call the resolution arrogant and confrontational. And we believe in walking along with people and not leading them.
Look, I'm not standing up for discrimination, obviously, but I think it is a conundrum when you have countries that are so dedicated to the proposition that we are, sinful, inappropriate perverts, and how do you flip them around and teach them, presumably over time. But
you would hope that the mandate of this person who's going to have this job would be something that everybody could agree on, that there shouldn't be violence against LGBT people.
No, they don't agree on that because they think we are worthy of death.
Some of us think we should have our heads chopped off.
Yes, exactly. So, they're not going to stand still for something that tells them they're wrong. That's just the way it is. Now, the footnote I was going to say about the Latin American countries is that Brazil, big piece in the New York Times this week about how Brazil, which had put in place some very progressive values early on, is subject to rising violence against the LGBT community, particularly because it has become more and more controlled by evangelical Christians.
Yes, indeed.
Some of course, planted from the United States, but they have vastly increased their members of Congress, and they are more in control of the,
And it's going through a lot of economic and political turmoil.
Yeah.
Justin, time for the Olympics.
That's a little dicey. You thought Zika was the only thing you had to worry about.
We do. The European Court has struck down Hungary's arbitrary detention of LGBT asylum seekers in the case of a 2-month detention of an Iranian gay man who was applying for asylum. They're saying that violated the European Convention on Human Rights.
They also decided that Italy had discriminated against a gay couple, a New Zealand man who couldn't get a residence permit to live with his Italian partner, and they fined Italy 20,000 euros.
Another not footnote, but variance to what's going on in Latin America is what's going on in Peru.
Well, they were planning to have a pride parade, and the government denied the permit.
Got a picture of it.
For the march, but a crowd gathered anyway in the Plaza San Martin. We have a picture of the crowd in the Plaza San Martin. They gathered, they said the hell with the government, and they gathered anyway, and they held their own little pride march and parade. We have a number of pictures of that. So congratulations to the activists in Lima, Peru, who defied the government to go ahead and hold their celebration.
Well, let's stick with the Pride parades in Canada. For the first time, the Prime Minister marched. Of course, it wasn't the first time that Justin Trudeau marched in the Pride parade in Toronto.
There he is
up there.
In the middle.
With the white pants, long pants. And there he is having a great time. And the guy just to the left of his flag is a guy named Basil McLeish, 29, a gay HIV-positive Syrian refugee who got to Toronto on the Rainbow Railroad on May 26th. He was had to flee Syria, couldn't get work in Egypt because they don't allow people with HIV to work there. Did you know that?
Charming.
Terrible. So there he is with the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. There was a big controversy in the parade. They had the Black Lives Matter group in the parade.
They had invited them to march up front.
And
then they sat down and stopped the parade.
And gave a bill of 12 demands that had to be met before they would go forward. The parade organizers signed them and then immediately said, we're not doing this.
Well, most of the demands were pretty easy and non-controversial, but one of the demands was that you got to get the cops out of the parade, except maybe the LGBT cops. But otherwise, you should not have the police who are violent against us and have a very bad history of raiding bathhouses and everything.
As
they
South
should not be in the parade.
As South Africa might say,
yes.
It might have been better if they had raised this in a meeting beforehand about how they would like to see the parade go. Look, our parade is too long. We've got a lot of groups we object to, but it takes a lot of work to talk about who should be in and who should be out,
well,
etc.
It's a real question.
And it should be a decision for the whole community.
It should, but you're not going to get the whole community to a meeting, and you're always going to have...
We used to.
Not really.
The Christopher Street Liberation Day Committee, boy, did I hate those meetings, but that's how things were done.
It wasn't the whole community.
Well,
but,
there were like 50 different groups represented.
Yeah. Well,
and it was all done by volunteers.
The point being is that there are a variety of opinions on this, and some people want everybody to participate in the parade and support us, and others would like it to be a more political, less corporate, less police-oriented operation.
In Paris, the parade that was cut in half, the activists there said, this is giving in to fear. Well, it was all because of all the troubles over there.
Well, Paris is a little scary, I guess.
But they had a
I don't mean to talk lightly about it.
They had a 3-minute complete silence for the victims of Orlando. They said you could have heard a pin drop. How about, did you see this? Pope Benedict has written a memoir, and he says, He came to know the presence of a gay lobby made up of 4 or 5 people who were seeking to influence his decisions, and he says he
4 or 5.
Well. This was the Politburo of the gay lobby.
Yeah.
He said he managed to break up this power group. God.
Wasn't he gay?
Yes, I would be hard to imagine that he is not homosexually oriented.
All right. Well, the good news is that the homophobic cardinal in the Dominican Republic has resigned. Now, this is also something I neglected to research before we started because we were arguing about this
all
on the way to
bishops
the
and
studio.
cardinals have to submit their resignations when they reach, I believe,
a
age
certain age,
70.
but I don't think this was about. We have to look
And then,
up how old
if the
he
Pope
was.
doesn't like you, he accepts your resignation.
I think
gladly.
the guy was forced out because he was so controversial and homophobic.
Forcing out would be, you said a terrible thing. You were calling people faggots and things like that down there in the Dominican Republic, and you're fired for that. And I'm not going to take this from anybody. And you know,
That's not how it works.
Okay. Well, right. They just wait around until people offer their resignations.
No, they
You look that up.
urge them to resign.
All right. You look that up, and I'm going to move on to the Australian elections.
Okay.
Well, the good news from the Australian elections is that a lot of people who were opposed to same-sex marriage lost, and then a lot of people who support it were elected. But the problem is, as of maybe you'll know more by the time you watch this, but Malcolm Turnbull, who led the Conservatives over there, which is called the Liberal Party, by the way,
Yes.
he did not, as of now, win a majority. He's still going to make a coalition. And he is still insisting on a plebiscite on same-sex marriage,
Yes.
not a free vote in the parliament. However, there are enough people elected from, if you want to call it our side, who say, we're not going to allow a plebiscite to go forward, and we're going to vote against it because it's expensive and stupid, but that may end up delaying the whole thing for 3 years.
His age is not listed in this story. I'll
Meanwhile,
keep looking.
Tony Pittman, our friend in Melbourne, he's an LGBT activist there. He keeps track of these things, and folks, drum roll please, we now have over 1 billion people around the world living in jurisdictions with full marriage equality, 1 billion. And he says, hey, we only started this in 2001. We went from 0 to 1 billion in just 15 years.
Colombia and parts of Mexico put us over the 1 billion mark, and Taiwan is speculated to be the next jurisdiction that may legalize same-sex marriage. In Guam, they have announced that, unlike several states in the United States, they will accept the federal government's guidelines on how to treat transgender students in schools, and they'll go right along with it.
They sound like very nice people.
Don't they?
It's just a matter of politeness.
You'd think. But on the Isle of Man, between England and Ireland, they have stalled their marriage legalization because of one homophobic member of the parliament.
Well,
he put the kibosh on it for the moment.
Staying in the United Kingdom there for a second, we told you what a mess their politics are. We got a picture of her here. Angela Eagle is considered the primary challenger. She's an out lesbian, and she was a lesbian activist to Jeremy Corbyn in the leadership challenge over there. And this is progress.
It is.
For the Labour Party.
In Chile, the government will propose a same-sex marriage legalization to the Congress in 2017, and they have said we're not going to let the church be part of this conversation.
And Ian McKellen, we think we forgot about Russia? Well, Ian McKellen was over in St. Petersburg for a festival for Shakespeare's birthday, and he met with the LGBT group there, and he asked if he could be a member, and they said sure. So he is now a member of their alliance.
In the Ivory Coast in Africa, the U.S. Embassy published a picture of 6 LGBTI men signing a condolence book at the embassy for the Orlando massacre. They identified them as LGBT.
They have had to flee.
They've been attacked by a mob.
What were they thinking?
They had to flee their homes.
What were they thinking?
Oh, God, terrible. Terrible. All right, AIDS news?
Well, we're going to talk about the porn initiative there. There's a protest. This is on the ballot.
This is ongoing.
It's on the ballot in California for November. It would allow any state resident to file a complaint with the state's workplace safety watchdog if you don't see a condom in a porn production. So the workers obviously are opposed to this.
The cardinal in the Dominican Republic is 79.
Well, yeah.
Well, shouldn't he have submitted his resignation a long time ago?
Maybe they have to keep doing it.
I think he was forced out.
Oh.
Gilead
Fire
announced price hikes for a couple of HIV drugs, Complera and Stribild. 7% hikes, but they raised it 6 months ago, 7%.
Folks, can we have a serious debate in this country during this campaign about something like controlling drug prices?
Well, they're talking about these trade pacts, and the worst thing about the trade pacts is that it protects the profits of the pharmaceutical companies and denies poor countries the right to generics. But that's not why people are objecting to the trade pacts.
No.
And new cases of bacterial meningitis in men who have sex with men, especially HIV positive in Southern California. Get the vaccine. All right, we have about
1 minute.
A minute and a half.
Hey, the cast of Fun Home is going to perform in Orlando on July 24th on their Sunday off to benefit the families of the massacre in Orlando.
And I want to remind you about some interesting film festivals coming up. Philadelphia, Q-Flix, July 5th through 10th. That's this week. Outfest LA, July 7th through 17th. Outtakes Film Festival, we talked a little about this last week on Cherry Grove, July 15th through 17th. The charming thing about that is it's a lot of home movies shot in Cherry Grove on Fire Island. So look for the Outtakes Film Festival in Cherry Grove.
And if you're not on our email list and would like to be, and you'd like to subscribe to our podcast or any of those things, go to our website. Go to gayusatv.org. There's a place where you can click on a button, get on our email list. You get a weekly preview of the program. We post the program there. If you want to learn more about that, go to gayusatv.org or search iTunes, right? If you want to subscribe to the podcast that Bill puts up for us so nicely every week.
Trump Tower, July 18th, 5 p.m., massive demonstration. Get a lot of people there. And you have one
And how about that Roger Ailes? Roger Ailes runs the Fox network. Well, he's got a big suit against him from a former anchor there, who said she was fired for refusing his sexual advances, which is a pretty horrifying thought of Roger Ailes coming at you.
No sexual harassment at Gay USA.
None.
None. Zero. We will see you next week, but start getting active in your communities.
Yep. And vote on November 8th.
Yes.
If not sooner.
Bye.
You can get an absentee ballot if you're not going to be around.